This is Carol King, the developer of Custom Home Builder Solutions, also known as CHS, and we're continuing with setting up CHS when you convert to CHS, and you can use Setup and Help and CHS Setup Steps. By this point in time, hopefully you've watched videos about all of these other things over to this point about gathering prior period data. Previous videos we talked about gathering prior period data that had to do with unpaid accounts payable as of your balance forward date, and with prior period job costs for jobs that are in progress. I'm going to quickly open this help right here for gather prior period data. I'm getting a note that something has been typed into the search field and that I could just use the icon to get to the thing that I'm interested in. This particular section in the help is just a help document that is a manual thing that you're doing, telling you about gathering various things for your prior period information. And we talked about prior period costs for jobs in progress and unpaid, etc. And there will be a section on prior period revenues, but in this case we're talking about step 4, making a detailed list of your open accounts receivable amounts due to your company, basically as of your balance forward date. So if you just go find them, get a list, be able to print a list from your old books or whatever it is. But if you put in a balance forward from accounts receivable from your old trial balance and put that into CHS, you need the detail of the actual invoices that are behind that balance forward. And it tells you a few things that you should write down about that. The total of the list should tie directly to prior period accounts receivable balance forward amount on your books. So I'll close that, and I'll close that. Now we are going to the section about, well, first of all, you need to set up some payers. If you have some payers, anybody that pays your company money is called payors in CHS, and you can watch the help and the videos about setting up payers, because when you do receivables, it's going to ask for the payer, or in other words, who owes you the money. But you can do that in a separate video. We're going to talk about post-open receivables invoices, and it's telling me again, it's given me some search things to have, so I'll click the magnifying glass to search for what I'm suggesting you search for. And we're going to talk about prior period accounts receivable and receivable balances invoices, and there's a help document here, and then this video will be behind the video. So let's just open this help document to have it available to go over. And it says there's a help document for gathering prior period info, which I already just opened before this one. And as explained in that document, the total of open receivables invoices should equal the total balance forwards posted to the prior period accounts receivable account on the accounting chart of accounts. These invoices should all have dates that are prior to or equal the balance forward for accounting. Prior period accounts receivable invoices are handled somewhat differently than current invoices, so they will not interfere with your balance forwards on your books. So to post a prior period, and we'll get into that, but first we're going to go to the chart of accounts. So let's get out of this help. Let's go to the home menu. Let's just collapse that, and we'll look for chart of accounts here, and we'll open the chart of accounts. First of all, I'd like to mention that CHS needs to know what account you'll be using to hold your total current accounts receivable under control accounts. And right here, accounts receivable. If you loaded the NAHB, these control accounts will already be loaded, but if you load a different chart of accounts, you'll need to tell CHS which ones you're going to be using to hold the accounts receivable balance all the time. It's a control account, so that when you enter a receivables entry, CHS will post the offset debit to this account that you designate. Also, it wants to know which account you're going to be using for prior period accounts receivable. In NHB one that we have that you can load, and the simpler one, this will be the accounts receivable, and right underneath the accounts receivable, it's like a contra account, we need you to have something called prior period accounts receivable, and tell CHS which GL account you set up for that. So I just wanted to point that out. So now if we go down to receivables area, we see accounts receivable. We're doing these videos in years way past the balance forward date of 12/31, so there can be other balances over here in the latest balance, so don't pay any attention to that. what we're paying attention to is the balance forward. Notice that if I click the pencil edit icon to do a balance forward for accounts receivable, I'm going to get a message that this is the account selected as the control account. In order for CHS to handle posting open receivables detail behind the balance forward, you'll need to use the prior period accounts receivable to put that balance forward in. And since I'm talking about it, I'll let you read that when it pops up in front of you yourself. So we used this pencil edit icon when we were entering all of our trial balance forward numbers that ended up balance forward numbers from our old books actually. We entered this amount for our accounts receivable balance forward. Now if you notice, if you add a new balance forward here, it just asks you for the balance forward for accounts receivable. That balance forward might be a group of invoices that total to that amount, and we're not asking you to break all that by job, because by posting the detail of the prior period open invoices, it'll get to the right job and or department. So you just ask for the amount, then you submit the new balance forward, which we already did, which created this entry that has a balance forward of $1,050 as of the balance forward date. And right now it's in Department OH and Job H, which means no job. But we'll see in a minute how we're applying that actually to a job. So I'll close that. I just wanted you to know that right now there's a balance in prior period accounts receivable, but when we finish with this process, it will have been moved up into accounts receivable. So if we go back to our help document that I thought I had open over here, here we go. It is telling you to post a prior period AR invoice. Click the button labeled Accounts Receivable on the Home tab under Payers, Deposits, and Receivables. I won't read all of the rest of this. I will demonstrate the rest of this. So let's go back to the Home tab, collapse that, and under Payers, Deposits, and Receivables, here's where you can add new payers right here, and watch that video if you're going to need some for this. But under Payers, Deposits, Receivable, we're going to click Accounts Receivable. And what we're looking for is this button, Add Prior Period AR Invoice, not a new receivables invoice. This one, if you used it, won't let you use a date on or before your balance forward. This one, when you use it, will only let you use a date on or before your balance forward. So let's click the Add Prior Period AR Invoice. So this is the same window that opens when you're doing a new invoice, but it does know that we're about to do a prior period invoice. You can see that right down here. And we're going to select a payer that we already have set up called Black John for John and Sue Black. And it will supply the next invoice number up for you. If you have some numerical invoice numbers from your old books, you could just type those in if you need to. Now the job that we're selecting here that dropped in, because if you looked at the job test 1, you're going to see that Black John has been assigned as the buyer on that job. So CHS was smart enough to know that we already set up a job attached to Black John, so it dropped in a job code for us, and it dropped in the custom homes department that is associated with that job. But in this case, we actually are doing a remodeling, and I need to go get that changed. So I could do that here for test 1 and decide that it's actually a remodel and save it. So you can see how you can do some things here. You can also set up your payer on the fly. I don't think this is going to let you because we're in the demo company and we don't let you set up new payers here. But normally it would open the screen to add a new payer and step through that. So we've got the remodeling department job. So we're going to create a new AR invoice, and it's alerting us that this is a prior period invoice and that the GL number will be set to the prior accounts receivable account, and the GL date must be on or before your book's balance forward date. Notice that automatically it drops in today's date, so you would be needing to change that, but I'm not going to do that right yet because I'm going to show you the error that happens. So you cannot set a GL number. Normally, entering new accounts receivable, you'd be selecting some sales account or something, whatever it is, the GL number that you need on your chart of accounts to post this accounts receivable to. Quite often that can be sales or sales remodeling, Or maybe somebody's just reimbursing you for some office supplies, so you select that GL number. But you cannot change this here because when you did your balance forwards, the amount for this invoice would have been included in another GL account already, or your books wouldn't have been in balance. So I'm just going to put a brief description. Invoice for work on November. I had to look at it just to be sure. And we only do have one accounts receivable invoice that equaled our balance forward amount. Our prior AR balance is showing right here. In case we do multiple ones, we'll see it going down as we do our work. But we only have one invoice for $1,050. And we might put some notes on that invoice. I've already got those notes in my clipboard. Remodeling work done for job and suit. For job, for suit, we'll just say 4. For job for Sue and John Black in November 2001. Just whatever you want to put in the notes that would print on some invoice or statement that you would be sending to them. Now I'm going to go ahead and try to submit this, and I will get an error. Notice that it says it was not submitted. Hover over things in red. The date is giving me an error, and if I hover over it, it says since this is a prior period AR invoice, the date must be on or before the company balance forward date of 12/31/2001. So what we're going to do is put in November 15th, 2001, the date of whatever you had that invoice for real in the year before you started CHS. It'll stay in red until I submit it again. So let's try. It says it did get submitted. And so there we go, and it tells you where you can go look for some things to see about your balances. But let's just review, edit, delete, copy AR entries. Now notice it's right here at the top because it is Black John, and you can see it here and what date it was, and that the amount that it is. Once a payment is posted to it, there'll be another line like you can see on this one down here. A deposit has been posted for this brown jack. And there's no balance for this invoice because there's been a deposit posted. But in this case, we haven't posted one for that, so it's just that line. So we could check that. But what we can do is view the journal entry that CHS posted when you did that. Look at that great big old journal entry that it did. First of all, what we care about is that bottom line, it took it out of prior period accounts receivable and got it into your real accounts receivable. But you can see all the stuff that has to be done behind the scenes by CHS to take care of prior period entries, which is kind of a pain in the neck. So if we go home, let's go back to our chart of accounts real quick and refresh it. I want you to notice that now the 1,050 is no longer in prior period accounts receivable. You can see the balance forward entry you made, but the latest balance of accounts receivable has just been increased because it was entered in there. So if you drill down just on the prior period accounts receivable, you can see the various things that were going on. The balance forward, took it out of the balance forward, put it into the job and department, all these things, but that the final result of that is 0 in prior period accounts receivable. Also, if you go over to the home and you go to general ledgers and financials, and let's just use the min-max dates, but cut it off at 12/31/2001 because we want to. And accounts receivable, remember, was 12/10, and we want it to also show us the prior period accounts receivable, everything in those two accounts as of 12/31. So again, we already looked at all the ins and outs going in, taking care of prior period accounts receivable just for that one invoice that has to be written behind the scenes. And we can see that accounts receivable trade just has the one invoice in it, which is what we want. We want this all cleared out, and we want this one to be 1,050 as of 12/31, which it will be because the GL date is 11/15/2001. Okay, I think that does it about accounts receivable prior period balance forwards, and I hope that helps. Thank you for watching.